Outside, the storm hammered against the glass, making the window panes shudder in their frames. Inside, the lamps remained dark. Only 3 candles burned, their flames casting sharp, nervous flickers across the room. Amara leaned forward, watching the wax pool and drip. Nana raised a hand, her finger trembling as it pointed toward the light. Her name was Kimpa Vita, she whispered. She was 20. No army, no steel, no gold. Yet, she brought an empire to its knees with nothing but her voice. Amara blinked, the sound of the wind outside fading into the background. Nana held the silence, letting the weight of the names settle into the floorboards. In 1704, the Kongo Kingdom was a place of ghosts, hollowed out by the slave trade and fractured by civil wars. The newcomers had arrived with muskets, but they brought something sharper, a faith used as a leash. They taught that suffering was divine will, and that obedience was the only path to salvation. They did not need iron chains, Nana added, her gaze fixed on the dancing wick, when they had already shackled the soul. Nana leaned back, the shadows deepening the lines on her face. The priests droned their Latin in the village square, but the people only went through the motions. They whispered their true prayers in the dark corners of their homes, waiting. Then, Kimpa Vita climbed onto the stone platform. She did not speak as a supplicant. She stood tall, her gaze fixed on the horizon, cutting through the humid air. Jesus was not born in Lisbon, she declared. The sound carried across the entire square, clear and absolute. He was born here, in the Congo. God does not speak Portuguese. He speaks Kikongo. The effect was immediate. A silence fell, then a ripple of movement. An old man dropped to his knees, his hands pressed against the earth. A warrior gripped his spear so hard his knuckles turned white. The fear that had held them in place for years simply evaporated. By the next morning, the colonial churches stood empty. The pews were bare, and the bells went unrung. People stopped listening to the priests and started listening to each other. The authority that had rested on fear suddenly had nothing left to anchor to. It was not just a speech, it was a reclamation. Inside a stone room, the air was thick with the scent of damp masonry and ink. The governor stood by the narrow window, watching the empty church square. Beside him, a priest paced the length of the floor, his boots striking the stone with a rhythmic, sharp sound. Reports lay scattered across the table, each one detailing the collapse of their influence. The priest stopped his pacing and slammed a hand down on the wood. "She is dismantling our authority piece by piece," he spat, his voice tight with frustration. The governor did not turn. He watched a single bird circle the roof of the chapel, his jaw set hard. He knew that if the people stopped fearing the church, they would soon stop fearing the state. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. "She has become a mirror," the governor said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "The people see themselves in her. We cannot argue with a mirror." The priest gripped his crucifix, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Then we break it. She must burn. Not for justice, not for law, but as a warning that will echo through every village." The decision hung in the stagnant air, cold and definitive. There would be no trial. There would only be the fire. On the 2nd of July, 1706, the soldiers led Kimpa Vita into a clearing. The ground was hard-packed earth. They bound her hands behind her, drawing the ropes until the knots bit into her skin, and chained her to a thick wooden stake. Around the base, they piled brush and dry branches, stacking the wood high. Hundreds of villagers gathered at the edge of the clearing, their bodies rigid, their faces frozen in a silence that felt heavier than a scream. The lead soldier struck a match. The flame caught the dry leaves instantly, and a roar climbed toward the sky. Heat surged outward, forcing the soldiers to back away, shielding their faces from the sudden, intense pressure. The flames danced, casting jagged shadows that flickered against the surrounding trees. Through the wall of smoke and heat, the figure at the center did not sway. She did not beg. She did not cry out for mercy. Her head remained level, her posture straight and unyielding against the orange glow. The fire consumed the wood, the heat intensified, but the silhouette stayed upright. The colonizers had intended to break the spirit of the people with this display, but as the flames roared, they only created a permanent, burning image of defiance that no law could extinguish. Back in the room, the 3 candles guttered in the draft. Amara reached up and wiped a single tear from her cheek. Kofi stared at the table, his voice thick with the weight of the story. She could have lived, he said. If she had only recanted, they would have spared her. Nana shook her head, the movement slow and deliberate. If she had knelt, she would have killed the truth she planted. She died to prove that their dignity was not a gift from the colonizers, but an inherent right. She leaned forward, the light catching the lines on her face. The strategy shifted across the sea. In America, slaveholders handed captives a Bible, but they used steel scissors to gut it. They removed every verse about freedom, every passage about escape. They bound a hollow faith in leather and called it holy. Kofi stared at the flickering flames, his hands tightening into hard, white-knuckled fists. The wood in the fireplace popped, a sharp sound in the quiet. "They cut the Bible?" he asked. Nana nodded as a low rumble of thunder vibrated the floorboards, in half. And a man named Nat Turner found the other half. But that is a story for tomorrow.